حي على الفلاح.
The Ottoman Empire, also called the Ottoman Sultanate, was a Turkish Islamic state that ruled much of North Africa, West Asia, and Southeast Europe between the 14th and early 20th century. At its peak in the mid-16th century, the total area of the caliphate was around 1.8 million kilometers, covering 3 continents. The Ottoman dynasty was founded in 1299 by Turkish tribal leader Osman Gazi in Anatolia. Over the next 3 centuries, the empire continued to expand towards the Balkans in the north and Egypt and North Africa in the west. The Byzantine capital of Constantinople, present-day Istanbul, was made the empire's capital in 1453. The Ottoman Sultans also adopted the title of Caliph in 1517 after abolishing the Abbasid Caliphate and established themselves as the successor of the Prophet ﷺ and to unite the Muslim Ummah. The Ottoman Empire is widely considered one of the most powerful and influential Islamic empire throughout history. Its strength lay in its military and strategic position controlling key trade routes, such as the Silk Road and maritime access to the Mediterranean, Black Sea, and Red Sea, giving it immense geopolitical influence. In the late 13th century, a series of small principalities emerged in Anatolia, sandwiched between the Byzantine and Mongol empires. These regions were dominated by Ghazis, warriors dedicated to fighting for Islam, and ruled by princes or beys. One such bey was Osman I, leader of Turkmen nomads, who gave his name to the Ottoman Principality, a region which grew vastly during its first few centuries, rising to become a massive world power. The resulting Ottoman Empire, which ruled large tracts of southeastern Europe, Western Asia, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean, survived until 1924, when the few remaining regions transformed into Turkey. A sultan was originally a person of religious authority. Later, the term was used for regional rules. The Ottoman rulers used the term sultan for almost their entire dynasty. Let's look at the history of every sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Osman I, 1300 to 1326. The father of the Ottoman Empire, Osman Gazi, was born in 1258 in the town of Sout. His father was Ertuğrul, the leader of the Kayi clan, one of the sub-tribes of the Oghuz Turks. Ertuğrul was serving the Seljuks, one of the most vital political and military structures of the era in the region. Osman succeeded his father and led the Kayi tribe after the latter died in 1280. He led the new epoch of the Ottoman Empire and opened the path for further development. Osman, the founder of the Ottoman Empire, expanded and strengthened the principality by using the weakened Byzantine Empire. By 1299, Osman had seeded a new state called the Beylik, marking the start of the Ottoman Empire. He was a man of war, a great planner, and a commander who could gather people around him. He created the administrative structures that would pave the way to a mighty empire, the Ottoman Empire. Osman's rule ceased 1 year before the conquest of Bursa in 1326. His son, Orhan, continued his work and further amplified and fortified the Ottoman Empire. Osman's demise marked the end of an era, but the groundwork he laid was the foundation of one of the greatest empires in the world. Orhan, 1326 to 1362. Orhan Gazi was the second Sultan, Bey of the rising state of the Ottomans. He was born in Sout in the house of Osman Bey. He succeeded his father upon Osman's death in 1326 and reigned until 1362. Orhan played a crucial role in the expansion and consolidation of the Ottoman state. During his reign, Orhan continued his father's military campaigns and conquests, expanding Ottoman territories in both Anatolia and the Balkans. One of the significant events during his rule was the capture of the city of Bursa in 1326, which became the first capital of the Ottoman Empire. Bursa served as the political and administrative center until the conquest of Constantinople in 1453. Orhan's conquest focused on expanding the Ottoman state in northwestern Anatolia and securing a foothold in Europe. He captured key Byzantine cities like Bursa, Nicaea, and Nicomedia. And in 1345, he conquered the Karasid Principality, consolidating control over northwestern Anatolia. Orhan's role in supporting the Byzantine civil wars allowed him to secure the strategically important fortress of Simpe in Thrace around 1352, marking the first Ottoman territory in Europe. Orhan married Holofira in 1299, who was a Christian but embraced Islam and was known as Nulifor Hatun afterward. She gave birth to Murad I, who would become the next Sultan of the empire. Murad I, 1362 to 1389. Murad I was the Ottoman Sultan who ruled from 1362 to 1389, leading major territorial expansion in the Balkans and Anatolia. In 1362, he captured Edirne and made it the new capital of the Ottoman Empire, shifting the focus towards the Balkans. He significantly expanded the empire's territory in both the Balkans and Anatolia, conquering cities like Sofia. Murad established new military and governmental structures, including the creation of the elite Janissary Corps and new administrative offices like the Grand Vizier. In 1389, he led his army to victory against a coalition of Balkan forces at the Battle of Kosovo field, culminating in the decisive Battle of Kosovo. Murad was assassinated during the Battle of Kosovo in 1389 and was succeeded by his son, Bayezid I. And to secure his position, he had his brother Yaqub Celebi executed. Bayezid I, the Thunderbolt, 1389 to 1402. Bayezid I, also known as the Thunderbolt, ruled the Ottoman Empire from 1389 to 1402. He was a powerful conqueror who expanded the empire into Anatolia and the Balkans, including Serbia and Greece, and famously defeated a large European army at the Battle of Nicopolis in 1396, which cemented his reputation. He successfully besieged Constantinople multiple times, but was unable to capture it before his defeat. Bayezid's ambitions brought him into conflict with the Turco-Mongol conqueror Timur, which culminated in the Battle of Ankara in 1402. The Ottomans were decisively defeated, and Bayezid was captured by Timur's forces. Bayezid died in captivity in March 1403. His capture and death plunged the Ottoman state into a period of civil war, known as the Ottoman Interregnum, as his sons fought for control of the throne. Interregnum, Civil War, 1403 to 1413. The interregnum refers to a period of political instability and struggles for the throne in Ottoman history. This process started after Bayezid's defeat against Timur in the Battle of Ankara in 1402. After the war, with the capture of Bayezid, the Ottoman throne was left unclaimed, and this situation led to serious administrative gaps within the empire. The interregnum is defined as a phase in Ottoman history in which the central authority was temporarily weakened. During this period, there was a struggle for the throne between the sons of Bayezid. The conflicts between Suleiman, Isa, Musa, and Mehmed II caused the division of the Ottoman lands. Each of them tried to establish their own authority in different regions. During the interregnum, these struggles between the brothers left the state in a difficult situation, both militarily and politically. Suleiman established control in the European territories, Rumelia, with his capital at Edirne. Mehmed centered his power in Amasya, in Anatolia, and fought against Isa for control of cities like Bursa. Musa, initially allied with Mehmed, later fought against Suleiman in Europe, eventually defeating and killing him in 1411. Musa then turned against Mehmed, besieging Constantinople due to the Byzantine emperor's support for Suleiman. The conflict culminated in the Battle of Kamurlu in July 1413, where Mehmed I, with the support of the Byzantine Emperor Manuel II, Palaiologos, and Serbian allies, defeated Musa. Musa was captured and slain, leaving Mehmed as the sole claimant. Mehmed I successfully reunited the fragmented Ottoman realm and is often regarded as the second founder of the Ottoman Empire. This period of the internal strife nearly led to the empire's collapse, but its eventual restoration under Mehmed I allowed for its continued expansion in the following decades. Mehmed I, 1413 to 1421. After a prolonged struggle among his brothers for control of the empire, Mehmed emerged victorious and crowned himself Sultan in Edirne in 1413. He consolidated his power, making Edirne a key capital and expanding the empire's territory by conquering parts of Albania and the Armenian kingdom of Cilicia. His reign is often referred to as the restoration of the Ottoman state, earning him the title the Restorer. He also expanded the empire's presence in Europe, notably through the conquest of Wallachia in 1415. Mehmed faced challenges during his reign, including a rebellion led by Sheikh Bedreddin, who promoted social equality and religious syncretism. This movement gained traction in the empire, leading to unrest. In 1416, Bedreddin's rebellion was suppressed, and he was executed in 1420. Mehmed I ruled until his death on 26 May 1421. Before his passing, he took measures to secure the throne for his son Murad II, including blinding his nephew Orhan, whom he viewed as a threat. He died in 1421 in Edirne and was buried in a mausoleum in Bursa. His son, Murad II, succeeded him. Murad II, 1421 to 1444. Murad II was the sixth Ottoman Sultan who consolidated the empire after the near collapse from the Battle of Ankara. After ascending the throne, Murad II faced rivals supported by the Byzantine Emperor, but he eliminated them by 1425 to restore Ottoman authority in Anatolia and force the Byzantine Empire to pay tribute. His reign is considered a period of recovery after the empire's near demise in the early 1400s. Murad II turned his attention to the Balkans, capturing the city of Salonika from Venice in 1430. He also fought a long conflict against resistance leaders like John Hunyadi of Hungary. Murad II led the Ottoman army to a decisive victory against a large crusader army at the Battle of Varna in 1444. He later defeated the combined forces of Hungary, Serbia, and Bosnia at the Battle of Kosovo in 1448. Murad II abdicated the Ottoman throne in 1444, primarily due to a combination of personal tragedy, a desire for peace, and complex internal political dynamics. Murad was heartbroken and depressed over the death of his favorite eldest son, Sezad al-Din Ali, in 1443. He sought to retire from public life and find peace. Having faced numerous internal and external conflicts throughout his reign, Murad had recently signed a peace treaty with the Kingdom of Hungary and other European powers, the Peace of Edirne, in June 1444. Believing the borders were secure, he felt he could safely leave the throne to his son. His son, Mehmed II, later known as Mehmed the Conqueror, was 12 years old at the time, but was considered a genius and future-capable leader. Murad may have wanted to push his son to his limits and prepare him for leadership. Mehmed II, 1444 to 1446. The young Mehmed was beset by internal unrest between two rival groups. On one side, the Grand Vizier, Chandarli Halil Pasha, and on the other, the Viziers, Zaganos Pasha and Sihabuddin Pasha. Both factions claimed they were protecting the rights of the young Sultan, but both were only using him as a means to claim more power for themselves. However, they weren't the only ones looking to take advantage of the situation. Almost as soon as Murad was out of the way, Hungary violated the peace treaty, and the participants of the crusade, led by the Hungarian general John Hunyadi, and including many of the major Eastern European kingdoms like Poland and Bohemia, relaunched their offensive with the support of the Pope in Rome. Murad II was recalled to the capital to lead the defense of Ottoman territory with an army of between 40,000 and 50,000 men. Outnumbering the Crusaders by as many as 2 to 1, the Ottomans were victorious when the two sides fought at the city of Varna. With the threat of the crusade eliminated, Murad resumed his rule as Ottoman Sultan. Although Mehmed II voluntarily left the throne to his father, it was obvious that he felt humiliated as a leader. He thereafter returned to Manisa in the Aegean region, where he got married and continued to develop his intellect. So ended Mehmed II's first rule as Ottoman Sultan, a reign of about 2 years. Murad II, second rule, 1446 to 1451. The powerful Janissary Corps, the elite infantry units of the Ottoman army, staged a revolt. Unhappy with the young sultan's rule, and likely due to issues such as budget deficits and the devaluation of currency, Grand Vizier Chandarli Halil Pasha, representing the more conservative faction of the court who favored an experienced ruler to stabilize the empire, also pushed for Murad's return. Faced with this internal instability, Murad II was persuaded to leave his retirement and reassume the Sultanate in 1446. He reigned for a second time until his death in 1451, at which point Mehmed II finally and permanently became Sultan. Mehmed II, the Conqueror. Second rule, 1451 to 1481. He was no longer a boy. At 19, he was sharp, fearless, and obsessed with one thing: prevailing over Constantinople. It was Rome's ancient heart, rich, powerful, and surrounded by walls that had resisted more than 20 sieges. Mehmed saw what others feared. He referred to it as his fate. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said, "Blessed is that commander, and blessed is his army," to the person who conquered Constantinople. In 1453, with an army of over 80,000 men, Mehmed moved towards Constantinople. But this wasn't just any army. This was a force prepared with cannons so massive they shook the earth. Emperor Constantine XI, in approximately 7,000 brave but outnumbered men, defended the city. Mehmed surrounded the city by land and sea. He built a fortress to block help from the north. He even shockingly and brilliantly dragged ships over land on greased logs to get around the chain that was blocking the harbor. The siege lasted 53 brutal days. The bombs exploded, arrows shot out, walls cracked, blood flowed. Then on May 29th, 1453, just before dawn, Mehmed launched a final assault. He made it through. Constantinople, the queen of cities, the center of Eastern Christianity, fell. The world changed forever. Mehmed had accomplished the unthinkable for a 21-year-old. He entered Hagia Sophia, once the greatest church in Christendom, and ordered it to be turned into a mosque. He renamed Constantinople to Istanbul and made it the Ottoman Empire's new capital. He wasn't just Mehmed anymore. He was Mehmed the Conqueror, or referred to as Fatih Sultan Mehmed. For the next 30 years, Mehmed waged campaign after campaign. He took Greece, Serbia, Bosnia, Wallachia, Trebizond, and much of the Balkans. He crushed the feared Dracula, Vlad, the Impaler of Wallachia, in a deadly cat-and-mouse war. He defeated powerful Italian fleets and even attacked Otranto, stepping foot into the heart of Italy. The Pope trembled, believing Rome itself might fall. Mehmed's empire stretched across 3 continents. He dreamed of a unified world under one rule, blending Islam, science, law, and culture. Mehmed was not just a warrior. He was a polymath, fluent in Arabic, Greek, Latin, Persian, Turkish, and Serbian. He was surrounded by scientists, poets, and philosophers. He rebuilt Istanbul with libraries, schools, markets, and mosques. He respected Christians and Jews, allowed freedom of religion, and even restored churches and synagogues. He laid the foundation of a multicultural empire that would last more than 450 years. Bayezid II, 1481 to 1512. Bayezid II ascended the throne after the death of his father, Mehmed II. He had to contend with a succession struggle against his brother, Selim Sultan, who was eventually defeated but remained a political challenge until his death. He earned the nickname the Just for his efforts to ensure the smooth running of domestic politics. He was a pious Muslim who funded public works such as mosques, colleges, hospitals, and bridges, and supported scholars and poets. He also became a protector to Jewish and Muslim refugees who were expelled from Spain and Portugal, resettling them in Ottoman lands. Bayezid II engaged in several military campaigns, including wars against Venice, to gain control of territories in the Peloponnese and a significant victory against Poland. In the Moldavian campaign of 1497, he also faced challenges from internal rebellions and external threats from emerging powers like the Safavid Empire. In his final years, Bayezid II faced pressure from his son, Selim I, who had secured the support of the Janissaries. Faced with this opposition, Bayezid II abdicated the throne to Selim in 1512 and died less than a month later while attempting to retire to his birthplace. Selim I, 1512 to 1520. Born in Amasya in 1470, Selim was the youngest son of Sultan Bayezid II. Selim's path to the throne was marked by brutal political maneuvering. He was not the favored heir of his father, Bayezid II, but gained the support of the elite Janissary corps due to his military experience as governor of Trabzon. After an initial failed rebellion, he forced his father's abdication in 1512 and then, to prevent civil war, implemented the Ottoman law of fratricide by executing his brothers and nephews. This established an undisputed succession for his own son. Selim I dramatically shifted the focus of Ottoman expansion from the west to the east, primarily to counter the rising threat of the Safavid Empire, which had converted Persia to Shia Islam and was inciting rebellion in Anatolia. Battle of Chaldiran, 1514. Selim's forces clashed with Shah Ismail I's army. The Ottomans, utilizing superior tactics, modern artillery, and muskets, decisively defeated the more mobile Safavid cavalry. This victory allowed Selim to briefly capture the Safavid capital, Tabriz, and annex eastern Anatolia and upper Mesopotamia. He also imposed a strict economic embargo on Persian silk, a major Safavid revenue source. Conquest of the Mamluks. Selim then targeted the Mamluk Sultanate, which controlled Syria, Egypt, and the Arabian Peninsula. The Mamluks, who had neglected modern firearms, were outclassed by the Ottoman army. Selim won key victories at the Battle of Marj Dabiq near Aleppo in 1516, where the Mamluk Sultan Qansawh al-Ghawri was slain, and the Battle of Ridanye near Cairo, 1517. The defeat of the Mamluks opened up North Africa to Ottoman influence, and the corsair Hayr ad-Din Barbarossa established a base in Algeria under Ottoman lordship. Selim's conquest doubled the size of the empire, adding vast Arabic-speaking territories and securing control over the Muslim holy cities of Mecca and Medina. This led him to adopting the pious title Khadim al-Haramain, the servant of the two holy mosques. These conquests also made him the first Ottoman Sultan to hold the title of Caliph, transferring the religious leadership of the Muslim world to the Ottomans. He ensured the imperial treasury was full at his death, commissioning a seal for it that remained in use for centuries, as none of his successors matched its fullness. His reign's focus on the East prepared the empire for its subsequent flourishing under his only son and successor, Suleiman I. Suleiman I, the Magnificent, 1520 to 1566. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire stood as a menace on the doorstep of Christian Europe, and no other Ottoman ruler was as feared by his enemies as Suleiman I, otherwise known as the Magnificent. He was the 10th and longest reigning sultan of the Ottoman Empire, from 1520 to 1566. He is widely regarded as the most powerful and influential monarch of the 16th century, presiding over the Ottoman Empire's political, military, and cultural golden age. Suleiman was a formidable military commander, personally leading 13 major campaigns that greatly expanded the empire's territory. His early victories included the capture of Belgrade in 1521 and the island of Rhodes in 1522. In 1526, he achieved a decisive victory at the Battle of Mohacs, which led to the collapse of the Kingdom of Hungary. He also annexed large areas of the Middle East, including Baghdad and the most of North Africa, while his navy dominated the Mediterranean, Red Sea, and Persian Gulf. His forces laid siege to Vienna in 1529, marking the peak of Ottoman expansion into Central Europe, though the siege was unsuccessful. The lawgiver, Kanuni, to his own subjects, Suleiman's most significant legacy was his comprehensive reform of the legal system. He worked with his chief judicial official, Mehmed Effendi, to harmonize the two forms of Ottoman law, the Islamic Sharia, divine law, and the secular Qanun, Sultanic law. His unified legal code, known as the Qanuni Osmani, Ottoman laws, remained in effect for over 300 years and ensured a high degree of justice and efficiency throughout the diverse empire. He also protected non-Muslim subjects, such as Jews and Christians, from persecution and false accusation. His long reign was marked by personal tragedy and political intrigue. To prevent civil war, he ordered the execution of his close friend, Grand Vizier Pargali Ibrahim Pasha, and two of his own sons, Mustafa and Bayezid. Suleiman died in his tent on September 6, 1566, during the siege of Szigetvar in Hungary, at the age of 71. His death was kept secret for several weeks until his son, Selim II, could safely assume the throne. Selim II, 1566 to 1574. Selim's path to the throne was marked by the elimination of his more popular and capable brothers. Mehmed died of smallpox. His half-brother, Mustafa, was strangled to death by the order of his father. And Bayezid was also executed after a rebellion against him and Selim. Selim survived the palace intrigues and ascended the throne without opposition after Suleiman's death during the siege of Szigetvar in 1566. Unlike his warrior predecessors, Selim II preferred to remain in the palace and enjoy a life of pleasure, delegating significant authority to his highly capable Grand Vizier, Mehmed Pasha. Sokollu Pasha effectively managed the empire's affairs throughout Selim's reign. Military and political achievements via Sokollu Pasha. Peace with the Habsburgs. In 1568, a significant treaty was signed in Edirne with the Habsburg Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian II, who agreed to recognize Ottoman conquests in Hungary and pay an annual tribute, securing the empire's northern borders. Conquest of Cyprus. The Ottoman forces successfully captured the strategically important island of Cyprus from the Venetians in 1571. Naval reconstruction. Following the devastation defeat of the Ottoman fleet at the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, the Grand Vizier Sokollu Pasha managed to completely rebuild the navy within a year, demonstrating the empire's continued strength and industrial capacity. The recapture of Tunis. Ottoman naval forces retook the fortress of Tunis from the Spanish in 1574, shortly before Selim's death, which restored Ottoman control over much of North Africa. Suppression of revolts. Rebellions in Yemen were successfully suppressed during his reign, solidifying Ottoman authority in the region. Selim was a great patron of the arts and literature. Himself a poet writing under the pen named Selimi, he commissioned public works in major architectural projects through the imperial architect Mimar Sinan. Sinan's masterpiece, the Selimiya Mosque in Edirne, was built during Selim's reign and completed after his death. He also oversaw extensive renovations of the Hagia Sophia Mosque in Istanbul. Selim II died on December 15, 1574, after a period of fever brought on by a head injury from a fall in a bathhouse while reportedly intoxicated. He was buried in a mausoleum at the Hagia Sophia. His reign marked a shift towards a more sedentary sultanate, where the Grand Vizier and palace favorites wielded more direct power, a trend that continued with his successor, Murad III. Murad III, 1574 to 1595. Murad III was the 12th Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. His reign was a complex period during which the empire reached its largest territorial extent in the Middle East, but also began a gradual internal decline marked by increasing corruption, economic difficulties, and the growing political influence of the imperial harem. Unlike his campaigning ancestors, Murad III was a sedentary ruler who rarely left Topkapi Palace and never led his armies in the field. He relied heavily on his Grand Vizier, the brilliant Mehmed Pasha, until Sokollu's assassination in 1579. After Sokollu's death, a power vacuum was filled by the women of the harem, particularly Murad's mother, Nurbanu Sultan, and later his favorite concubine, Safiya Sultan. This era, part of the Sultanate of women, saw increased nepotism and political maneuvering that often undermined effective administration. The empire suffered severe financial stress during Murad's reign. An influx of cheap silver from the New World caused high inflation, leading to social unrest and a devaluing currency. This strain was exacerbated by heavy taxes needed to fund long wars. The economic issues culminated in a rebellion by the Janissary Corps in 1589, who were being paid in debased coinage. The Corps, once an elite force, degenerated into an undisciplined group, further weakening central authority. Despite the internal challenges, the empire continued military expansion, largely through its generals. War with Safavid Persia. Murad declared war on the Safavid Empire in 1577, seeking to exploit internal chaos in the Persian court. The 12-year conflict ended with the Treaty of Constantinople in 1590, which resulted in temporary significant territorial gains for the Ottomans, allowing the empire to reach its greatest extent in the Middle East. Habsburg Wars, a long and exhausting war with the Habsburg monarchy over Hungary, began in 1593. This conflict saw some Ottoman vassal states in Moldavia, Transylvania, and Wallachia ally with the Habsburgs. Moroccan and African influence. Ottoman forces took Fez from the Portuguese in 1578, making Morocco a temporary vassal state. Ottoman influence also expanded along the Swahili coast of East Africa, with suzerainty recognized in cities like Mogadishu and Mombasa. Alliance with England. Diplomatic relations with Elizabethan England were strengthened, as both nations found a common Protestant Muslim front against Catholic Spain. England exported war materials like tin and lead to the Ottomans. Upon his death in 1595, his son and successor, Mehmed III, ordered the execution of his 19 half-brothers to secure the throne, a brutal but traditional Ottoman practice. Mehmed III, 1595 to 1603. Mehmed III was not an active military leader like his great-grandfather Suleiman the Magnificent, preferring to delegate power and remain in Constantinople. His mother, the powerful Safiya Sultan, held significant influence in state affairs, effectively co-ruling the empire. Major events of his reign included the Long Turkish War. Ottoman defeats against the Austrian prompted Mehmed to take personal command of the army in 1596. The first Sultan to do so since 1566. The Ottomans captured the fortress of Eger and achieved a crucial, though nearly disastrous, victory at the Battle of Kerestes. Despite this win, the war continued with mixed results and significant losses for the empire. Jalali revolts, widespread and serious rebellions in Anatolia by disgruntled former Ottoman officials and peasants challenged central authority and added to the empire's instability during his rule. Execution of Shehzad Mahmud, fearing a potential coup and influenced by court intrigue. Mehmed ordered the execution of his own popular adult son, Shehzad Mahmud, in 1603. This act deeply affected his younger son and successor, Ahmed I. Mehmed III died on December 22, 1603, at the age of 37. The cause attributed to either a plague, a stroke, or distress over his son's death. He was succeeded by his 13-year-old son, Ahmed I, who subsequently ended the practice of systematic princely execution, replacing it with life imprisonment in the palace known as the Kafes system. Mehmed's reign is generally seen as a period where the seeds of the Ottoman Empire's internal decline were sown, despite outward appearances of military strength. Ahmed I, 1603 to 1617. His reign is notable for the construction of Istanbul's iconic Blue Mosque and for breaking the Ottoman tradition of royal fratricide. Ahmed was the son of Sultan Mehmed III and Handan Sultan. His father had his own 19 brothers executed upon his ascension, and later had Ahmed's older brother Mahmud executed as well. When Mehmed III died suddenly in 1603, Ahmed became the Sultan at the young age of 13. Breaking with tradition, he spared the life of his younger, mentally unstable brother, Mustafa, opting instead for his confinement in a special section of the palace called the kafes, cage. This decision eventually established a new system of succession based on seniority rather than the systematic execution of potential rivals. Ahmed is best remembered for his piety and his architectural patronage. His most famous legacy is the construction of the Sultan Ahmed Mosque, known as the Blue Mosque due to its stunning blue Iznik tiles. It was completed in 1616 and stands as a masterpiece of Ottoman architecture. He commissioned extensive renovations to holy sites, including the Kaaba in Mecca and the Prophet's Mosque in Medina, reflecting his deep religious commitment. He was also an accomplished poet, writing under the pen named Bahti. Ahmed's reign was characterized by internal instability and ongoing conflicts with the Habsburg and Safavid empires, which often ended unfavorably for the Ottomans. The Treaty of Zitzvatorok. This treaty ended the long-running war with the Habsburg monarchy and marked a turning point by abolishing the annual tribute previously paid by Austria to the Ottomans and formally recognizing the Habsburg emperor as an equal to the Ottoman Sultan. The war with Safavid Persia. Campaigns against Safavid Empire resulted in territorial losses. In 1612, Treaty of Nasuh Pasha ceded much of the Caucasus region back to Persia, restoring borders to those of 1555. The Jalali revolts. Ahmed's rule coincided with the peak of the Jalali revolts, widespread uprisings in Anatolia driven by heavy taxation and economic hardship. He appointed Kuyuchu Murad Pasha to suppress these rebellions, which he did with brutal efficiency. The harem influence. As Ahmed matured, he became more involved in palace life, which allowed women of harem, most notably Qasim Sultan, to gain significant political influence. Ahmed died young, at the age of 27, from typhus and gastric bleeding in November 1617. He was succeeded by his brother, Mustafa I, marking the first time an Ottoman Sultan was succeeded by his brother rather than his son. Mustafa I, 1617 to 1618. Mustafa I's reign was a brief and chaotic period lasting approximately 3 months, during which he served as a political pawn for competing court factions. Mustafa's ascension was unprecedented, as it was the first time an Ottoman Sultan was succeeded by his brother rather than his son, establishing a new principle of seniority for the succession, known as the Kafes system. He had spent the preceding 14 years in isolated confinement within the palace, a situation which likely contributed to his widely reported mental instability. A court faction concerned that Sultan Ahmed I's son, Osman II, was too young to rule, chose Mustafa as the new Sultan. Due to his erratic behavior and weak mental faculties, Mustafa was a mere figurehead. Real power was wielded by his mother, Halima Sultan, who acted as a regent and the various powerful cliques within the palace. Contemporary accounts describe unusual and eccentric behavior, such as pulling the turbans of his viziers, yanking their beards, and throwing gold coins to the fish in the palace fountain. The reign was marked by political maneuvering and power struggles. The court hoped that becoming sultan would improve his mental condition, but his incapacity became apparent to all men of state. After only a short time on the throne, another palace faction, led by Chief Black Eunuch and Grand Admiral, conspired to depose him, arguing his mental state rendered him unfit to rule. In February 1618, Mustafa was dethroned in favor of his young nephew, Osman II, and sent back to confinement in the old palace. Osman II, 1618 to 1622. Born in 1604, Osman II was the son of Sultan Ahmed I and Mahfiruz Hatun. Upon his father's death in 1617, the throne went briefly to his mentally unstable uncle, Mustafa I. After Mustafa was deposed due to his weak-mindedness, the 14-year-old Osman was instated as Sultan in 1618. Despite his youth, Osman II was well educated, a poet writing under the pen name Farisi, and determined to restore the power of the Sultanate, which had been eroding due to factionalism and the Sultanate of women era. He lacked a strong Valide Sultan, Sultan's mother, to lobby for him, making him politically vulnerable. Key actions during his short reign included: he made peace on the empire's eastern border by signing a treaty with Safavid Persia. He personally led the army in the Battle of Khotin in 1621 against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The battle resulted in a stalemate in a peace treaty unfavorable to Osman, for which he blamed the Janissaries' indiscipline. Furious with the Janissaries, Osman planned to create a new loyal army recruited from Anatolian commoners and nomads, effectively seeking to eliminate the corrupt Janissary corps. He closed their coffee shops, where they gathered and plotted, and even contemplated moving the capital to Damascus or Bursa. Osman's radical reform plans and attempts to curb the Janissaries' power made him many enemies among the military and the religious elite. When rumors spread that his planned Hajj to Mecca was a cover to raise a new army in the east, the Janissaries revolted in 622. The rebels stormed the palace, deposed Osman, and released the mad Mustafa I from imprisonment to place him back on the throne. The captured Osman was publicly humiliated and taken to the Yadikuli fortress, the Seven Towers dungeon. There, at the age of just 17, he was brutally strangled to death by the order of Grand Vizier Kara Davud Pasha. He was the first Ottoman Sultan to be slain by his own soldiers, a pivotal and dark moment in Ottoman history. Mustafa I, second rule, 1622 to 1623. Mustafa I's second reign was a turbulent period where the Sultan was a mere figurehead amid severe political chaos and factionalism. He had been released from his confinement, Kafez, and restored to the throne by the Janissaries after their successful rebellion and the brutal assassination of his nephew, the reforming Sultan Osman II. Mustafa's mental condition, which did not improve with his return to the throne, rendered him entirely incapable of ruling. He was a puppet in the hands of the powerful court cliques, primarily his mother, Selim Sultan, who acted as regent, and her brother-in-law, Grand Vizier Kara Davud Pasha. The reign commenced with the execution of all those involved in the murder of Osman II, a move to satisfy the various factions at court. Several key officials, including Halka Omar Effendi and the former Grand Vizier's regent, were put to death. The period was characterized by anarchy in the capital. Conflicts raged between different military factions, notably the Janissaries and Sipahis, cavalry. A major rebellion erupted in Anatolia, led by Abaza Mehmed Pasha, the Governor-General of Erzurum. He sought to avenge the murder of Osman II and marched on Istanbul. The regime's attempt to appease him by executing Kara Davud Pasha failed to stop his advance. Faced with ongoing internal conflicts, a collapsing state administration, and a powerful rebellion, the ulama, Islamic legal scholars, and other leading officials intervened. They issued a fatwa, religious ruling, that an insane ruler could not hold the position of caliph. They convinced Selim Sultan to agree to her son's deposition on the condition his life be spared. On 1623, after a reign of just over a year, Mustafa I was deposed for the second and final time and returned to confinement in the Kafez. His 11-year-old nephew, Murad IV, was placed on the throne, with his powerful mother, Qasim Sultan, as regent. Mustafa lived out the remainder of his life in seclusion and died in 1639. Murad IV, 1623 to 1640, born on July 27, 1612, to Sultan Ahmed I and his Greek consort Qasim Sultan. Murad IV ascended the throne at the age of 11, after the deposition of his mentally unstable uncle, Mustafa I. During his early years, the empire was in disarray, plagued by internal revolts, corruption, and territorial losses to Persia. Real power was held by his mother, Qasim Sultan, as regent, and the Janissary Corps and Spahi cavalry ran rampant, often forcing the execution of high officials. In 1632, after the Janissaries stormed the palace and slayed the Grand Vizier, Murad IV, then aged 20, seized absolute power. Determined to restore order, he acted swiftly and ruthlessly. He imposed strict curfews and banned alcohol, tobacco, and coffee in Istanbul, viewing coffee houses and taverns as centers of sedition. The penalty for disobedience was instant execution without trial. He often patrolled the streets in disguise, personally punishing offenders. He ordered the execution of many military and provincial leaders, including his own brothers, to secure his rule and instill fear. It is estimated he was directly responsible for thousands of executions during his reign. Murad IV was a capable military commander who personally led his army. His reign's key event was the Ottoman Safavid War, 1623 to 1639, during which he aimed to retake lost territories. In 1635, he led a campaign that resulted in the recapture of Armenia and Azerbaijan. His most notable achievement was the capture of Baghdad in 1638 after a 40-day siege, a victory that re-established Ottoman control over Mesopotamia. The ensuing Treaty of Zuhab in 1639 established borders that largely remain the basis for the current Iran-Turkey-Iraq boundaries. Murad IV died at the young age of 27 from cirrhosis of the liver in 1640. His death left his sole surviving mentally disabled brother, Ibrahim, as his successor, narrowly avoiding the end of the Ottoman dynasty. His strict, heavy-handed rule successfully restored order and state finances to the troubled empire, but at an enormous human cost. Ibrahim, 1640 to 1648. He spent most of his early life in the kafes, the cage, a secluded part of the palace where Ottoman princes were confined to prevent them from staging rebellions. This 20-year isolation and the execution of his brothers by his predecessor, Murad IV, severely traumatized him, leading to chronic physical and mental health issues, including extreme paranoia and anxiety. When Murad IV died in 1640 without a male heir, Ibrahim was the only surviving male of the dynasty. He was so terrified that he initially believed his brother was still alive and plotting a trap. He only accepted the throne after seeing Murad IV's corpse. In his early years as Sultan, with the guidance of able Grand Vizier Kemankez Kara Mustafa Pasha, Ibrahim managed to maintain stability, renew peace treaties with Austria and Persia, and stabilize the currency. He even showed initial interest in governance, inspecting Istanbul's markets in disguise to identify problems. However, his mental state deteriorated and he retreated to the harem, coming under the influence of unqualified court favorites and concubines. In 1645, he initiated a long and costly war over the island of Crete, which led to naval blockades of the Dardanelles and severe food shortages in the capital. To fund his lavish lifestyle and the ongoing war effort, he imposed heavy taxes, leading to widespread discontent among the populace, the military, and religious scholars. The ongoing crisis and the Sultan's unmanageable behavior led to a conspiracy against him involving the Janissaries, the ulama, and even his own mother, Qasim Sultan. In August 1648, the Janissaries revolted and deposed Ibrahim. His 6-year-old son, Mehmed IV, was proclaimed the new Sultan. Ibrahim was imprisoned in the same cafes where he had spent his youth. 10 days later, with a fatwa, religious ruling, sanctioning his death, he was strangled with a bowstring on August 18, 1648. His death was only the second time in Ottoman history that a sultan had been executed. He was buried in the Hagia Sophia next to his uncle, Mustafa I. Mehmed IV, 1648 to 1687. Nicknamed Avci, the hunter, for his passion for hunting, his long reign of 39 years was the second longest in Ottoman history after Suleiman the Magnificent. Mehmed IV ascended the throne at the age of 6, a result of the deposition and execution of his unstable father, Ibrahim. The early years of his rule were a period of intense crisis, marked by court intrigues, Janissary revolts, and an ongoing war with Venice that blockaded the Dardanelles. Real power initially rested with his grandmother, Qasim Sultan, and later with his mother, Turan Sultan. Turan Sultan, an able regent, eventually appointed the highly competent Koprulu Mehmed Pasha as Grand Vizier in 1656, granting him full executive powers. This ushered in the transformative Koprulu era, a period of stability and military revival for the empire, during which Mehmed IV largely withdrew from direct state affairs to pursue his deep interest in hunting. Under the Koprulu viziers, Mehmed Pasha and his son Fadil Ahmed Pasha, the Ottoman Empire experienced a significant resurgence. They regained Aegean islands from Venice and eventually completed the long-running conquest of Crete, 1669. Successful campaigns were waged against Transylvania and Poland, expanding the empire's borders in Europe to their greatest extent in the West during his reign. Mehmed IV, who often ruled from the city of Edirne, participated in these military campaigns and was referred to as a Gazi, holy warrior, by his contemporaries for his role in these conquests. The siege of Vienna and downfall. The tide turned under the last Koprulu Grand Vizier of his era, Merzifon Lukara Mustafa Pasha, whose ambitions led to the catastrophic siege of Vienna in 1683. The Ottoman army suffered a crushing defeat by a coalition of Polish, Lithuanian, and Holy Roman Imperial forces led by King John III Sobieski. This marked the beginning of the Great Turkish War, during which the Holy League began successfully pushing the Ottomans out of Hungary and the Balkans. The military defeats and deteriorating economy created widespread dissatisfaction among the troops and the populace. In 1687, Mehmed IV was deposed by a military coup and imprisoned in the Topkapi Palace. He spent his final years in retirement in Edirne, where he died of natural causes in 1693. He was succeeded by his brother Suleiman II. Suleiman II, 1687 to 1691. He spent most of his life in seclusion before ascending the throne during a time of great crisis, delegating significant power to the Koprulu Grand Viziers to stabilize the empire. Suleiman II spent nearly 39 years confined in the kafes, the cage, a form of palace prison for royal princes designed to prevent rebellions, but which left them without governance experience. His long isolation left him physically frail and largely unprepared for the responsibilities of ruling a vast empire. Suleiman II came to power in 1687 after his brother, Mehmed IV. Mehmed IV was deposed following the disastrous defeat at the Second Battle of Mohawks in the ongoing War of the Holy League. The empire was in disarray, facing military defeats, economic troubles, and army mutinies. Recognizing his own lack of experience, Suleiman II appointed Koprulu Fazil Mustafa Pasha as his Grand Vizier in 1689, giving him a free hand in administration and military affairs. Under Koprulu's leadership, the empire saw a brief resurgence. Military successes. Ottoman forces halted Austrian advances into Serbia and successfully reconquered Belgrade and Nice in 1690. Koprulu implemented crucial fiscal and administrative reforms, including abolishing oppressive taxes, confiscating wealth from corrupt officials, and reforming military provision to restore order and stability. Suleiman himself was known for his extreme piety, often consulting with religious scholars and enforcing orthodox Islamic practices, which helped garner support from the ulama, religious authorities, during the crisis. Suleiman II's health deteriorated during his short reign. He died of a chronic illness, likely cirrhosis of the liver, in Edirne on 1691, just as he was preparing to lead a campaign in Hungary. He was succeeded by his brother Ahmed II. Despite his personal frailties and short 4-year reign, his decision to delegate authority to the capable Köprülü family temporarily stemmed the tide of Ottoman decline during a critical period of the Great Turkish War. Ahmed II, 1691 to 1695. His short reign was dominated by ongoing military crisis and defeats during the Great Turkish War against the Holy League, Austria, Poland, and Venice. Ahmed II was the son of Sultan Ibrahim and Muazzez Sultan. Following the Ottoman tradition of princely seclusion to prevent coup, he spent nearly 43 years confined to the kafes, the cage, the palace's restricted section, before ascending the throne at the age of 48 after his brother Suleiman II's death. This long isolation left him with little practical experience in governance. Upon his ascension, Ahmed II inherited a struggling empire and confirmed Köprülü Fadil Mustafa Pasha, an able leader from the powerful Köprülü family, as Grand Vizier. However, only weeks later, the Ottomans suffered a devastating defeat at the Battle of Slankamen in 1691, where the Grand Vizier himself was slain. This loss resulted in significant territorial losses in Hungary to the Austrians and left Ahmed without his most capable administrator. Throughout his 4-year reign, the empire faced continuous military setbacks and internal strife. Venetian forces captured the island of Chios in 1694. Although it was later retaken just after his death, revolts and unrest occurred in the distant provinces of Iraq and Syria. A major fire in Istanbul caused extensive damage to the city. Despite the crisis, Ahmed II was known for his piety, fairness, and interest in arts, particularly poetry and calligraphy. He is said to have written several copies of the Quran. He made efforts to listen to his people by sometimes traveling in disguise to observe conditions, and also attempted some fiscal and administrative reforms. Worn down by disease like hydropsy or fluid buildup and the continuous military disasters, Ahmed II died in Edirne on February 6, 1695, at the age of 51. He was buried in the tomb of Suleiman the Magnificent in Istanbul. He was succeeded by his nephew Mustafa II. Mustafa II, 1695 to 1703. He was the last Ottoman Sultan to personally command his army on the battlefield, attempting to reverse the empire's military decline. But his reign ended with significant territorial losses and his deposition. Unlike many of his predecessors who were confined to the kafes, palace prison, Mustafa spent much of his youth in Edirne and was educated in religious studies, poetry, and calligraphy. He succeeded his uncle, Ahmed II, to the throne in 1695. During the ongoing and challenging Great Turkish War against the Holy League, Austria, Poland, Venice, and Russia, Mustafa II was determined to revitalize the Sultanate and personally lead his armies in the tradition of early Ottoman conquerors like Suleiman the Magnificent. His early campaigns saw some initial successes. The Ottoman navy, under his direction, recaptured the island of Chios from Venice in February 1695. He led his army into Hungary, achieving victories against the Habsburg forces at the Battle of Lugos and Sene in 1695 and 1696, respectively. However, these gains were short-lived. In 1696, the Russians under Peter the Great captured the fortress of Azov. The decisive blow came in 1697, when the Ottoman army suffered a catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Zenta by the forces of Prince Eugene of Savoy, leading to the death of the Grand Vizier and thousands of soldiers. The defeat at Zenta forced the Ottomans to sue for peace. In 1699, Mustafa II signed the Treaty of Karlowitz, a watershed moment that marked the first major territorial losses for the empire after centuries of expansion. Under the treaty, the Ottomans ceded all of Hungary and Transylvania to Austria, the Peloponnese Peninsula to Venice, and Podolia to Poland. Following the immense losses, Mustafa II retreated from state affairs to live a life of leisure and hunting in Edirne, leaving the administration to his former teacher and Shaykh al-Islam, Feyzullah Effendi. Feyzullah Effendi's corrupt rule and nepotism, combined with economic hardship caused by the long war and new taxes, led to widespread discontent among the populace and the military. A military mutiny known as the Edirne event broke out in Istanbul in 1703. The rebels marched to Edirne, forcing Mustafa II to abdicate in favor of his brother, Ahmed III. Mustafa II died just a few months later, on December 29, 1703, at the age of 39, and was buried in Istanbul. Two of his sons, Mahmud I and Osman III, later became sultans. Ahmed III, 1703 to 1730. His reign is best known for the Tulip era, a period of peace, cultural flourishing, and relative openness to Western influences, which ended abruptly with a violent rebellion. Ahmed was the son of Sultan Mehmed IV. He spent 16 years in seclusion in the palace's cage before his ascension. He became Sultan in 1703 when his brother Mustafa II was deposed by a Janissary revolt known as the Edirne event. Ahmed's early reign was politically unstable, but he found a capable administrator in Grand Vizier Shorlulu Ali Pasha, who stabilized the treasury. A key military event occurred during the Russo-Turkish War, 1710 to 1711, when the Ottoman forces achieved a major victory at the Pruth River campaign, forcing Peter the Great to return Azov to Ottoman control. However, subsequent wars with Venice and Austria were less successful. The disastrous Austro-Turkish War, 1716 to 1718, led to the Treaty of Passarowitz in 1718, in which the Ottomans ceded significant territories, including Belgrade, the Banat, and parts of Serbia to Austria. Following the Treaty of Passarowitz, Ahmed III and his new Grand Vizier, Nevsehirli Ibrahim Pasha, initiated a period of peace and internal focus known as the Tulip era, 1718 to 1730. This era was characterized by artistic patronage. Architecture, literature, and art flourished, with the Sultan and his court developing an obsession with tulip cultivation and appreciation. There was increased diplomatic engagement with Europe, with envoys sent to Paris to observe Western ways. This led to the introduction of Rococo elements in Ottoman architecture and court life. The first official Ottoman printing press using Turkish and Arabic script was established by Ibrahim Mutafarrika in 1729. Ahmed commissioned numerous public works, including beautiful standalone fountains, such as the fountain of Ahmed III in Istanbul, and libraries. The opulence and extravagance of the Tulip era, coupled with new taxes and military setbacks on the Persian frontier, caused widespread public resentment. In September 1730, a mob uprising of janissaries and citizens led by an Albanian former janissary named Patrona Halil forced Ahmed III to abdicate. Ahmed III handed the throne to his nephew, Mahmud I, and retired to the Kafes, where he lived in confinement for 6 more years until his death on July 1st, 1736. Mahmud I, 1730 to 1754. Mahmud's initial challenge was to re-establish control over Constantinople, which was temporarily in the hands of the rebels. He eventually had the rebellion's leader, Patrona Halil, and thousands of his followers executed in November 1731, restoring stability. His reign was primarily defined by 2 major theaters of war. Wars in Europe, the Austro-Russian-Turkish War, 1735 to 1739, resulted in a significant Ottoman victory. The Treaty of Belgrade, 1739, brokered by French mediation, ceded Belgrade and northern Serbia back to the Ottomans. Wars in Persia, conflicts with Safavid Persia and the rising power of Nadir Shah occurred throughout his reign. These wars were inconclusive and ended with the Treaty of Kurdan in 1746, which essentially restored the borders established a century earlier by the Treaty of Zuhab, 1639. Mahmud I delegated most government affairs to his capable grand viziers and advisors, such as Nubian eunuch Hachi Basir Aga. He encouraged some reforms, particularly in the military, engaging the French strategist Claude Alexandre de Bonneval, Humbarachi Ahmed Pasha, to reorganize the artillery corps and establishing a military technical school. He commissioned several public works, including new libraries, one in the Hagia Sophia courtyard and the large Kagaloglu bath. Mahmud I, who never had any children, died suddenly on December 13, 1754, after attending Friday prayers. He was succeeded by his younger half-brother, Osman III. Osman III, 1754 to 1757, born on January 2nd, 1699, at the Edirne Palace. Osman was the son of Sultan Mustafa II. At the age of 4, when his father was deposed, he was moved to the Kafes, the palace prison for princes, in the Topkapi Palace. He spent approximately 51 years in confinement, a longer period than any other Ottoman prince, before ascending to the throne at the age of 55 upon the death of his older half-brother, Mahmud I, in December 1754. This prolonged isolation is believed to have made him an anxious and somewhat erratic ruler, known for his suspicion of his grand viziers, whom he changed frequently. Osman III's short reign, less than 3 years, was relatively peaceful in terms of foreign policy, marked by general neutrality during the European 7 Years' War. He focused instead on domestic issues and public order, often walking around Istanbul in disguise to observe the conditions of his people firsthand. His policies included social regulations. He imposed strict rules regarding non-Muslims, requiring them to wear distinguishing clothes or badges. He also ordered women to wear plain, loose clothing when in public and not appear in the streets during state ceremonies. He oversaw the completion of the magnificent Nuru Osmaniye Mosque complex, meaning Light of Osman, a major example of Ottoman Baroque architecture, which had been started by his predecessor. His reign was marked by a series of misfortunes, including severe fires that destroyed large parts of Istanbul in 1755 and 1756, minor earthquakes, and a winter severe enough to freeze the Golden Horn. Sultan Osman III died on October 30, 1757, from a malady, possibly septicemia, from a boil on his thigh. As he had no children, he was succeeded by his cousin, Mustafa III, the brother of the prince he was rumored to have poisoned a year earlier. Mustafa III, 1757 to 1774, a devout and intellectual ruler. He attempted to implement much needed military and economic reforms to halt the empire's decline. But his reign ended disastrously with a costly war against Russia. Born on January 28, 1717, to Sultan Ahmed III, Mustafa III spent 27 years in the secluded life of the Kafez palace prison after his father was deposed in 1730. Upon the death of his cousin, Osman III, Mustafa ascended the throne on October 30, 1757. He was a learned man, educated in science, mathematics, and literature, and a poet writing under the pseudonym Jahangir. Mustafa III inherited an empire in financial strain with a weakening administration. Initially, with the help of his capable Grand Vizier, Kocha Rangi Pasha, he pursued a policy of peace and fiscal conservatism. He also focused on justice and order. He worked to ensure justice, regulate coinage, and improve infrastructure like aqueducts and grain stores. Recognizing the need for a stronger military, he recruited French experts, including the artillery officer Baron Francois de Tott. To reorganize the Ottoman Artillery Corps, he reopened an engineering school and founded a naval mathematics school in 1773 to train military personnel. After a major earthquake devastated Constantinople in 1766, he used his personal wealth to help the victims and rebuild the city's landmarks, including the Fatih Mosque complex. Despite his desire for peace, Russian expansion into Poland and Crimea forced Mustafa III to declare war on Russia in 1768. The war proved catastrophic for the Ottomans. The Russian Navy destroyed the Ottoman fleet at the Battle of Chesme in 1770, and the Russian armies occupied vast territories. Mustafa III died of a heart attack on January 21st, 1774, at the Topkapi Palace, while the war was still ongoing. The war concluded after his death with the devastating Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca, which resulted in significant territorial losses and granted Russia broad rights to intervene in Ottoman affairs. He was succeeded by his brother Abdul Hamid I. Abdul Hamid I, 1774 to 1789. He was the 27th Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, a devout and pacifist ruler. He inherited a bankrupt empire amidst a losing war, forcing him to confront severe challenges and attempt essential but difficult reforms. He ascended the throne on January 21st, 1774, upon the death of his brother, Mustafa III. The treasury was so depleted at his ascension that he could not afford the traditional donative to the Janissary troops. Abdul Hamid's reign was dominated by continuous conflicts and territorial losses. Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca, 1774, almost immediately after taking the throne, the ongoing Russo-Turkish War ended with deeply humiliating Treaty of Küçük The Ottoman ceded territory granted Russia navigation and commercial privileges in the Black Sea and the Straits, and most critically, allowed Russia to interfere in Ottoman domestic affairs on behalf of Orthodox Christians. The loss of Crimea. Although the treaty nominally made the Crimean Khanate independent, it soon fell under Russian control and was formally annexed by Russia in 1783, a major blow to Ottoman prestige and security. Despite his pacifist inclinations, Russians and Austrian expansionist designs forced Abdul Hamid to declare war again in 1787. The war went poorly for the Ottomans, culminating in the brutal fall of Ochakov to Russia in December 1788. Despite military failures, Abdul Hamid I was a consensuous ruler who empowered able Grand Viziers to implement reforms. He worked to strengthen the central government against powerful provincial warlords and initiated vital military modernization efforts. He established a new artillery corps and is credited with founding the Imperial Naval Engineering School. He was admired for his personal involvement in public welfare, even directing the Constantinople Fire Brigade during a major fire in 1782. Abdul Hamid I died of a stroke on April 7, 1789, shortly after receiving the news of the fall of Ochakov. He was succeeded by his nephew, Selim III. Selim III, 1789 to 1807. Regarded as an enlightened ruler, he is best known for his comprehensive reform program, aimed at modernizing the empire along European lines, which ultimately led to his downfall and assassination. Born on December 24th, 1761, Selim was the son of Sultan Mustafa III. Unlike many predecessors, he had a relatively free youth and received an excellent education in literature, calligraphy, science, and foreign languages. He corresponded with European leaders, including King Louis XVI of France, and was convinced of the necessity of fundamental reforms to counter the empire's decline. He succeeded his uncle, Abdul Hamid I, in April 1789, inheriting an empire facing ongoing wars with Austria and Russia. After the Treaty of Jassy in 1792 provided a period of peace, Selim III initiated his ambitions to reform program known as the Nizam Sidid, New Order. The core of these reforms was military modernization. He established a new infantry corps trained and equipped in the style of contemporary European armies to finance the new military and bypass the corrupt old system. A separate treasury was created, funded by new taxes and the confiscation of certain fiefs. He established the new military and naval engineering schools, brought in foreign experts, and reorganized the artillery and naval corps. Selim established the first permanent Ottoman embassies in major European capitals, London, Paris, Vienna, and Berlin, to better understand Western politics and culture. Selim's reforms threatened the established interests of the Janissaries, the traditional elite military corps who had become a powerful and conservative political force. He also faced opposition from the ulama, religious scholars, and some local notables who viewed his Western-inspired changes as a threat to Ottoman traditions and Islamic law. Selim's failure to integrate the new army with old military structure and his indecisiveness in the face of opposition proved fatal. In 1807, a major Janissary mutiny, known as the Kabakchi Mustafa uprising forced Selim to abolish the Nizami Sadid and eventually led to his deposition and imprisonment. His cousin was placed on the throne as Mustafa IV. In July 1808, a reformist official, Alemdar Mustafa Pasha, marched to Istanbul to restore Selim III to power. In response, Mustafa IV ordered the assassination of Selim and his brother, Mahmud. Selim III was strangled by assassination on July 28, 1808. His legacy profoundly influenced his successor, Mahmud II, who would later successfully implement similar modernizing reforms. Mustafa IV, 1807 to 1808. Mustafa was raised to the throne on May 29, 1807, after the Janissaries revolted and deposed Selim III. His ascension was a victory for the traditionalist faction, who immediately reversed many of Selim's modernization efforts. Mustafa IV's reign was marked by intense political instability and chaos, with real power often resting with the rebels who brought him to power. A key turning point came when a pro-reformist commander, Alemdar Mustafa Pasha, a powerful Ayan provincial notable of Rus, marched his army to Istanbul in July 1808 with the intention of restoring Selim III to the throne. Upon hearing of the approaching army, Mustafa IV, in an effort to secure his own position, ordered the execution of the only two remaining male members of the House of Osman besides himself, his deposed cousin Selim III and his half-brother Mahmud. Selim III was murdered, but his brother Mahmud managed to escape by hiding with the help of a concubine. When Alemdar Mustafa Pasha's forces stormed the palace, they discovered Selim's body but were able to rescue Mahmud. Consequently, Mustafa IV was deposed on July 28, 1808, after a reign of just over a year, and Mahmud II was proclaimed the new Sultan. Mustafa IV was imprisoned in the palace harem. A few months later, amid another Janissary uprising aimed at restoring him to the throne, his cousin and successor Mahmud II ordered his execution to prevent further political instability. Mustafa IV was strangled on November 16, 1808, at the age of 29. He was buried in the mausoleum of his father, Abdul Hamid I, in Istanbul. Mahmud II, 1808 to 1839, often called the Peter of the Great of Turkey. He is celebrated as a transformative figure for his extensive Western-inspired reforms that essentially laid the groundwork for the modern Turkish state, a period known as the Tanzimat era. For nearly 2 decades, Mahmud cautiously consolidated power, learning from Selim's mistakes. His most pivotal moment came in 1826 with the auspicious incident when the Janissaries once again rebelled against his proposed military reforms. Mahmud was prepared. He had loyal artillery fire upon their barracks, effectively crushing the centuries-old, corrupt, and powerful core. Thousands were slain, exiled, or imprisoned, removing the main obstacle to modernization. With the Janissaries gone, Mahmud implemented sweeping changes. He established a new European-style conscripted army known as the Victorious Soldiers of Muhammad. He centralized government, abolished the military land grants, timars, introduced a cabinet system, established a postal service and a census. He introduced a European-style dress code for civil officials, including the fez, and his portraits were publicly hung in government offices, a first in Ottoman history. Despite internal reforms, Mahmud's reign saw significant territorial losses. Greece gained independence in 1832 after a prolonged war. France conquered Ottoman Algeria in 1830, and the empire ceded Bessarabia to Russia. He also faced a severe challenge from his ambitious governor of Egypt, Muhammad Ali Pasha, whose forces defeated the Ottomans in Syria and advanced on Constantinople, forcing Mahmud to seek Russian intervention to save his capital. Mahmud II died of tuberculosis on July 1st, 1839, at the age of 53. The day after his death, the Golani Edict was issued by his son and successor, Abdul Hamid I, formally inaugurating the Tanzimat reorganization era of comprehensive modernization efforts he had initiated. Abdul Hamid I, 1839 to 1861. He was the 31st Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Abdul Hamid was born on April 25, 1823, and received a European-style education, becoming the first Sultan to speak fluent French. He ascended the throne at the age of 16 in July 1839, a time of crisis for the empire, including a military defeat by the rebellious Egyptian viceroy, Muhammad Ali. Shortly after his accession, on November 3, 1839, his government issued the Noble Edict of the Rose Chamber, a foundational document of the Tanzimat reforms. This edict promised security of life, property, and honor to all subjects, regardless of religion or race, and proposed fair taxation and impartial administration of justice. A second edict in 1856, the Imperial Edict, further granted civil and political equality for non-Muslims, including abolishing the special head tax and allowing non-Muslims into the army. Major events and achievements: Crimean War, 1853 to 1856, the most significant military event of his reign, in which the Ottoman Empire, allied with Britain and France, fought against Russia. The war resulted in the Treaty of Paris, which officially included the Ottoman Empire in the concert of Europe, recognizing its territorial integrity. His reign saw the introduction of Ottoman paper currency, a national flag, a modern financial system, a new secular civil and criminal law codes modeled after France. He commissioned the opulent Dolmabahce Palace, the first European-style imperial residence, and oversaw the restoration of the Hagia Sophia Mosque. Abdul Hamid's reform efforts faced opposition from conservative Muslim governing classes and encountered financial difficulties, leading to the empire's first foreign loans in 1854. He died of tuberculosis at the young age of 38 on June 25, 1861. He was succeeded by his half-brother, Abdul Aziz. Notably, 4 of Abdul Hamid's sons went on to become sultans: Murad V, Abdul Hamid II, Mehmed V, and Mehmed VI. Abdul Aziz, 1861 to 1876. He oversaw significant modernization efforts, particularly of the navy and railways, but his extravagant spending habits and political instability ultimately led to his deposition and mysterious death. Born on February 8, 1830 in Istanbul, Abdul Aziz was the son of Sultan Mahmud II and the younger brother of his predecessor, Abdul Hamid I. He had an education grounded in Ottoman traditions, but also a strong interest in Western ideas. He ascended the throne on June 25, 1861 at the age of 31. Abdul Aziz continued the Tanzimat reforms, focusing on state and societal modernization, including the Ottoman Navy and Army, as well as railway development. In 1867, he became the first Ottoman Sultan to visit Western Europe. His reign faced financial challenges due to lavish spending and military projects, leading to foreign debt and a default on debt payments by 1875. This, combined with nationalist movements and opposition, resulted in political instability. On May 30, 1876, a coup by ministers and military leaders deposed him. Abdul Aziz died of severe blood loss from incisions to his wrists on June 4, 1876. While the official investigation at the time concluded that he had committed suicide, this remains a subject of controversy, and many suspected he was assassinated by his political rivals. Murad V. He was the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire for just 93 days in 1876, making his reign one of the shortest in history. Unlike many Ottoman princes, he traveled to Europe and interacted with exiled liberal politicians known as the Young Ottomans, supporting the idea of a constitutional monarchy. This made him a favorite among reformers and a potential rival to his uncle, the reigning Sultan, Abdul Aziz, who consequently placed him under close surveillance. In May 1876, a group of ministers and military leaders, including the influential Mehmed Pasha, deposed Abdul Aziz in a coup and brought Murad to the throne. They had high hopes that he would introduce the constitutional reforms necessary to modernize the empire. However, the abrupt and violent nature of his uncle's overthrow and subsequent death severely traumatized the sensitive new sultan. Already struggling with weak nerves, Murad suffered a full mental collapse, exhibiting paranoia, anxiety, and bizarre, erratic behavior. He became incapable of performing his duties or even appearing in public for the traditional sword girding ceremony. After just 93 days, the same ministers who had installed him determined he was unfit to rule. A fatwa, religious ruling, was secured to sanction his removal on grounds of insanity. On August 31st, 1876, he was deposed in favor of his younger half-brother, Abdul Hamid II. Murad spent the remaining 28 years of his life confined in the opulent Chiragan Palace on the Bosphorus, where his mental health reportedly recovered after some time. Several failed attempts were made by his supporters to free and restore him to the throne during his long house arrest. He died there in 1904 at the age of 63. Abdul Hamid II, 1876 to 1909. Abdul Hamid II was more than just an Ottoman Sultan. He was a master strategist, a feared autocrat, and a deeply religious yet pragmatic ruler. Abdul Hamid II was a patron of architecture, infrastructure, and education. Unlike his ancestors who focused on grand mosques, his contributions were more practical, political, and strategic. Some of his most significant works include Yildiz Palace expansion. Instead of ruling from Topkapi or Dolmabahce, he made Yildiz Palace his headquarters. The complex was highly fortified, symbolizing his paranoia and defensive mindset. Hamidiyya drinking water system, an elaborate water network that provided clean water to Istanbul, still in partial use today. Hijaz Railway, a monumental railway from Damascus to Medina, built with global Muslim donations. It was designed not just for Hajj pilgrims, but also for military mobilization, ensuring control over rebellious Arabian tribes. Darul Achiz, a massive social welfare complex in Istanbul, providing shelter, food, and medical care for the poor, one of the earliest examples of state-sponsored social security. His architectural touch wasn't limited to Istanbul. He built hundreds of schools, military academies, hospitals, and administrative buildings across the empire. One of Abdul Hamid's most significant political moves was rejecting Zionist leader Theodore Herzl's proposal to establish a Jewish state in Palestine in exchange for Ottoman debt relief. Herzl reportedly offered millions of gold coins, but Abdul Hamid II refused, declaring, "I will not sell even a single inch of Palestinian land. It is not mine to sell. It belongs to the Islamic Ummah. Let the Jews keep their money." This cemented his legacy in Palestinian history as one of the last rulers to resist Zionist expansion in the region. Unlike previous Ottoman rulers who focused on their empire alone, Abdul Hamid II had a global vision to unite the entire Muslim world under Ottoman leadership. He cultivated alliances with Muslim rulers in India, Central Asia, and Africa, sending emissaries to inspire resistance against British, French, and Russian colonial rule. His dream was to establish a global Muslim communication network using the Ottoman telegraph system to spread political messages, Islamic schools, and scholarships for Muslims outside Ottoman lands, creating a new generation of pro-Ottoman leaders. A secret alliance with Japan, believing that an Asian Muslim coalition would counterbalance European dominance. This vision ultimately failed, but it laid the groundwork for later Islamic movements in the 20th century. His rule was maintained by a formidable secret police network and strict censorship, which led to widespread opposition from the Young Turks movement, comprised mostly of educated military officers and bureaucrats. In 1908, the Young Turks launched a revolution forcing the Sultan to restore the constitution and parliament. After a short-lived counter-revolutionary uprising in April 1909 that his opponents blamed him for instigating, Abdul Hamid II was deposed by a parliamentary vote. He was exiled to Thessaloniki and succeeded by his brother Mehmed V. Despite his removal, he remained highly respected. When the Balkan Wars broke out, 1912 to 1913, the Ottoman government secretly consulted him on military strategy. In 1918, as World War I was coming to an end, Abdul Hamid II died in Istanbul, likely from kidney failure. His last words, according to family accounts, were, "The empire is falling. May Allah protect it from traitors." Mehmed V, 1909 to 1918. A gentle, pious, and well-educated man. His reign coincided with the final catastrophic decline and eventual dissolution of the empire, during which he served largely as a figurehead for the powerful Committee of Union and Progress, CUP government. His 9-year reign was marked by continuous territorial losses and wars. Italo-Turkish War resulted in the loss of the last North African territories, modern Libya and Dodecanese Islands, to Italy. Balkan Wars. The empire lost almost all of its remaining European territories west of Constantinople. When World War I began in 1914, the Central Powers, Germany and Austria-Hungary, offered Ottomans assistance in recovering their economic losses in return for their help in forming an alliance. Besides, Ottomans had very little to no alliance at that time and this might have been their only chance of survival. However, the decision to join Central Powers proved disastrous, as the empire was unprepared for the scale and complexity of the conflict. The Central Powers were defeated, and allies began occupying the Ottoman territories and started partitioning it among themselves under the Treaty of Sèvres, 1920. The treaty dismantled much of the empire, leaving only Anatolia and parts of the Middle East under Ottoman control. However, they soon lost Arab-dominated areas because of British-backed Arab revolt, 1916 to 1918. Mehmed V died of natural causes at Yildiz Palace on July 3, 1918, at the age of 73, only 4 months before the end of World War I and the empire's final defeat. He did not live to see the formal collapse of the Ottoman Empire, which occurred under the reign of his successor and half-brother, Mehmed VI. His reign is remembered as a period when the Sultanate became marginalized and the empire faced existential crisis that led to its end. Mehmed VI, 1918 to 1922. He ascended the throne as the Ottoman Empire faced defeat by the Allied powers. His reign was characterized by Allied occupation. Following the armistice of Mudros in October 1918, Allied forces occupied Istanbul, and the Sultan's government became de facto puppet administration. Treaty of Sèvres in August 1920. Representatives of Mehmed's government signed the Treaty of Sèvres, a punitive pact that planned to partition most of the remaining Ottoman territories. Rise of the nationalists. The harsh treaty spurred a strong Turkish nationalist movement in Anatolia led by Mustafa Kemal Pasha Ataturk. The nationalists established a rival government in Ankara and fought the Turkish War of Independence against the occupying powers and the Sultan's government. Abolition of the Sultanate. After the nationalists achieved military victories, the Grand National Assembly in Ankara officially abolished the Ottoman Sultanate on November 1st, 1922, effectively ending 600 years of Ottoman imperial rule. Fearing for his life, Mehmed VI requested refuge on a British warship, HMS Malaya, and fled Istanbul on November 17, 1922. He went into exile in Malta and later settled in San Remo, Italy, where he lived the remainder of his life in relative poverty. His imperial bank accounts frozen. He died on May 16, 1926, and was buried in the cemetery of the Suleimaniya Taqiyya Mosque in Damascus, Syria, as he could not be buried in Istanbul. Abdul Majid II, 1922 to 1924. He was the last head of the House of Osman and the final caliph of the Ottoman Caliphate from 1922 to 1924. He never reigned as a sovereign sultan. Abdul Majid attempted to assert a more political role, even going so far as to suggest he would be prepared to accept the responsibilities of the secular state. This was viewed as a threat by the leader of the nationalist movement, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, who was determined to create a completely secular republic free from Ottoman dynastic influence. On March 3, 1924, as part of his sweeping secular reforms, Ataturk issued a law abolishing the Ottoman Caliphate. Abdul Majid II was deposed as the last Ottoman caliph, along with Mustafa Sabri, who was the last Ottoman Sheikh al-Islam. But this was no coincidence. The abolishment of the caliphate had been premeditated and was an imperialist agenda in the making. Strategies and secret meetings had been ongoing for years, and a plan had been hatched to bring down the Ottoman Empire along with its leadership and role as the uniting beacon of all Islamic countries and communities around the globe. Although Sunni Muslims around the world recognized the Caliph, who in turn recognized the legitimacy of Muslim governments, they did not pay for his upkeep. Because the Caliph was known as the Ottoman Sultan, it was assumed he did not need outside financial support, despite being stripped of all his assets and wealth. The end of the Caliphate corresponded with the period when almost the entire Muslim world came under colonial rule. In this circumstance, any role that a caliph might play would have been very restricted, since he would have little, if any, authority within the colonial space. Turkish nationalists did everything in their power to humiliate and belittle the caliph. Within hours, the imperial family was asked to leave Turkey. Abdul Hamid II and his family were taken by train to the Swiss border. He first settled in Switzerland and later moved to Paris, France. He spent his remaining years in exile. He died in his home in Paris on August 23, 1944, as he could not be buried in Istanbul. He was interred in the Al-Awza'i Mosque in Damascus, Syria. With his death, the last formal link to the centuries-old Ottoman and Islamic caliphal institutions was severed. There is no doubt that the Ottoman Empire was the most powerful Islamic empire because it controlled strategic trade routes and had a formidable army too. It lasted for 600 years due to its long military and naval power, which protected its territories. However, as time went on, many internal and external factors contributed to the Ottomans' decline and loss of power. Weak rulers who were interested in their leisure rather than focusing on the empire's affairs were the main cause of its decline. Further, other European countries became more powerful and advanced over time, whereas the Ottomans failed to match their advancements and eventually lost power. Their military became outdated and lost crucial battles in the 18th and 19th centuries, which resulted in the loss of many important territories in Europe and Asia, contributing to its fall. Adam Smith, the 18th century founder of modern economics, was exceedingly inspired by the Islamic method of governing. He proclaimed that the empire of the caliphs seems to have been the first state under which the world enjoyed the degree of tranquility which the cultivation of the sciences requires. It was under the protection of those generous and magnificent princes that the ancient philosophy and astronomy of the Greeks were restored and established in the East. That tranquility which their mild, just, and religious government diffused over their vast empire revived the curiosity of mankind to inquire into the connecting principles of nature. However, not all colonial men shared the same liberal views as Adam Smith. The British Foreign Minister Lord Curzon, addressing the British Prime Minister shortly before the Second World War, he stated, "We must put an end to anything which brings about any Islamic unity between the sons of the Muslims, as we have already succeeded in finishing off the Khilafah. So we must endure that there will never arise again unity for the Muslims, whether it be intellectual or cultural unity."